Welcome to this second episode of Talking South of 2019, and my guest today is Jennifer Hynes. Hi, Jennifer.
Hey, Torsten. How are you today? Good to see you.
I'm very good, thank you. I've been outside and I've seen the first occurrence of icebergs on the fjord today.
Oh, really?
It's kind of a spring sign up here in Greenland because when it's coldest and most frozen, the glacier at the end of the fjord, it doesn't calve as much into the fjord. So today one of the tiny icebergs has come all the way out, like 100 kilometers or something, all the way out to Nuuk, and it's floating around here. So it's nice.
Iceberg season. You're starting to see them.
Yeah, the iceberg season I think is like maybe February to November or something. Yeah, but it peaks in October. That's when you get the biggest and most and everything. So, and how's your day? How is your part of the world?
It's good. I spent the morning talking to a guy, another activist out in Devon, actually. His name is Jan Wiley, and he has a database of environmental change that he has been populating with articles ever since 2014, I think. He's got it cross-referenced, cross-flagged. You can do any kind of involved search that you want and get a very concise set of topic-specific articles. So we've been talking about a project that we're working on to incorporate like video analysis of different types of topics, kind of like 10-minute, quick hit topic-specific sort of videos to come up as part of the search set. So, yeah. We're both kind of techies, and we've been talking about this project for a while, and it's starting to take fruition. So I'm happy about it. So he has a database site called Open Intelligence.
Yeah, I know. That's the one in the UK, right?
Yeah. Have you ever spoken with Jan?
Yeah. I've been to his database, and it kind of reminds me of myself because I'm a techie too, or I used to be, in my old days, and I'm sort of considering what other parts of the cryosphere or the frozen Earth that I want to include on my new site, Frozen Earth. So after I've been accused of being, or actually I've been given a prize for climate denier of the week.
Oh, have you really?
By a certain Sinclair, Peter Sinclair from Yale University. So
exactly, I call it the Great Methane Wars.
Yeah,
yes. You and I are jointly honored in that regard, aren't we?
Yeah, or I have been, put in a special position. I think I am the main climate denier of the week. But anyway, for my site Frozen Earth, I'm considering such elements as Himalayan mountain ice, and of course Antarctic ice, obviously, and other kinds of mountain ice glaciers, like in the Andes Mountains, and of course Greenland, because as we talked about earlier, we don't, because of a satellite failure, we don't have proper numbers from the Greenland ice shelf. But that's
not only that, but I'd like to kind of point out that the U.S. government shutdown that went on for about 35 days may have affected scientific data sources. Is that not true?
Yeah, I think so. And but just to go back to the Himalayan mountain ice, that's for 2 billion people that get water for agriculture and for drinking and everything from the Himalayas. That's like, even though the Arctic may be more important to the whole planet. There's still 2 billion people who get their water from the Himalayas, and that's melting like crazy as well. You know, so.
Oh my God! So how much longer do you think that the Himalayan ice sheets have?
No, that's almost impossible to say before I go and look at the data. You know, I want to find a data source for either runoff water or the ice volume itself. But that's why I want to expand a bit the kinds of data sources and graphs that I make, because the name Frozen Earth, it means the same as the cryosphere. So it's all the parts of the planet that's frozen, you know, including the permafrost, which we are going to talk more extensively about today, I think. So,
absolutely.
So I want to include those as data sources that I will present as well for later in the year or maybe next year, as soon as I can find proper data sources for them. Scientific sources.
That's interesting. Good luck in your search for Himalayan ice data. I'm sure it's going to find a good home with you as you can draw that into your overall map of our frozen systems that are still left here on this Earth, but rapidly going away.
Yeah, hoping to find some data sources before the ice is going away. Yeah.
That's so sad, right? So I'd like to give a big shout out to my partner in crime, Dougie, the abolitionist of WIGO, Atlanta's great radio in Atlanta, Georgia. He has a great show called Voices of Dissent, and it's every Saturday, and you can actually catch it on line WIGO 1570 AM, I believe. Anyway, Voices of Dissent is Eastern 5 to 7 every Saturday. He does an absolutely edgy and great show with incredible music. He and I have been partnering up, and we've gotten a couple of productions together with our joint interests and talents, and he's providing the soundtracks and I'm doing the videography. So our first one was Hot House Earth, and that, I don't know how many views it's garnered at this point. I think almost
it's a lot.
it's like 11,000 or something like that. I mean, it passed 10,000, I know that. And so that we put out, I guess, what was it, like 3 months ago or something like that? And it was kind of an amalgamation of a couple of articles with a fabulous soundtrack that Dougie kind of designed and put together for it. And then we just did Life on a Shrinking Planet, and it was kind of the same idea, taking a professional recording, and in this case it was a Bill McKibben article that was published in the New Yorker just like around Thanksgiving of 2018, I believe it was. And Dougie chose the soundtracks, and I put together the videography, and it's also doing really well. It's got about 6,700 views now, I think. So I'm very pleased with our partnership. So this is a real meeting of minds, you know, two very different people coming together and doing what they can to spread awareness, because I think that's what all of us here are trying to do in our own way. Once we get that bug, you know, once you go, oh my fucking God, what is going on? And you go through all of that, then you're like, well, what am I going to do with this knowledge? And it affects everybody in a different way. Like Torsten has got like this amazing site, frozen.earth, and it's like completely badass. So he's got a gift for prose too. Let me tell you, it's biting, analytical, good taste prose. So everybody had to look at Frozen Earth, where he's got a recent rebuttal to the current methane scuffle.
Yeah. So you've been looking into that, haven't you? The latest place.
I have quite a bit. It's very interesting. So this video, and you know, you and Wolfgang had your little rebuttal, but this little video that came out on Yale Climate Connections, which I really love Peter Sinclair and his work. I've always loved him. I think he's a great educator. I think his productions are edgy and tasteful, and I have all admiration for him. And maybe this wasn't entirely his fault, but what ended up happening is this video that came out has this, what is her name? Carolyn Ruppel, is it?
Yeah.
And she is the head of the U.S. Methane Studies in the U.S. Geologic Survey or something like that. Correct me if I haven't got that quite right, but something about that. And she kind of like bashed and dismissed the methane threat. And it was so funny. I mean, I'm like so stoked. I've made the big time. Like Methane Monster 2, Demise of the Arctic, which Torsten and I jointly republished, I guess, about 3 months ago after the first one had been taken down and it needed a new home. So I had to put it in the care of the Viking, you know, because I needed a really good home. I mean, he's going to frickin' defend it to Valhalla with his swords. I'm like, fine, this is a safe place. He understands responsibility. So he and I premiered Methane Monster 2, Demise of the Arctic, which I originally had published back in 2015 or something like that, right? So anyway, she comes on and she basically dismisses all this methane conspiracy. And it's like all these videos are being shown as like these bad conspiracy videos that are scaring this poor girl, and I thought it was freaking hysterical. I couldn't stop laughing. I don't know what your response was. You've been rather vocal.
I think my response was more like, oh, this is very recognizable as political propaganda, you know, because I can recognize the difference between scientific communication on one side and propaganda on the other. And then the typical thing is that you use like this almost crying girl who plays sort of the confused public figure.
It was so funny. This girl was traumatized. It was like a religious conversion. Oh, I was so sad before when I believed in the methane conspiracy. My life was horrible and I was obsessed and everything was messed up.
And you can almost see her tear up as well, you know. It's almost tears in her eyes.
She's crying. She's having a breakdown. And then I reached out to Carolyn Ruppel from the U.S. Geologic Survey and got
my
her
savior.
Oh my God. I am so relieved. I don't have to worry about the methane threat anymore.
Yeah, it's because the reason she doesn't have to worry is that the scientist Ruppel in the USGS, she's able to say that in order to melt ice, you need to add heat. And nobody knew that, you know, before. So obviously it can't melt. And also the ice caps are safe because you need to add heat. And we don't have heat in this global warming world. That's one thing we lack all over, right?
Oh, right. Well, don't add heat. Because the last time I checked, heat plus ice equals... God, I can't remember. What was it?
I forgot. It's so long since I was at college, I forgot. What's the thing that you get if you heat ice?
Water, that's it. So heat plus ice equals water. And I think that's kind of the way it works.
Is that the melting process? It's called melting?
Right.
Yeah, right.
So the reason that the methane hydrates are not going to melt is because it requires heat, and their melting activity draws the heat, and there's not enough heat to melt all of this methane. Although if we ever bothered to look at the permafrost, which is just a riot of holes and sunken earth and percolating bacteria, and God help us, I mean, it is almost hysterical. And I've chosen, if you want to, Torsten, we can. I've chosen that part of the video where they kind of highlight all the, and I can share my screen and show the audience because I bet they'll get a big kick out of it. But I call this the Great Hydrate Wars.
Please give it a spin,
I was deep into that stuff. I was watching YouTube videos and I started even getting into like conspiracy minded like places where I thought this was like being hidden from us. Like people were trying to hide the fact that these mechanisms existed when really we're in store for much more catastrophe than like mainstream scientists are willing to let us know because they don't want to cause public panic.
I can't say for sure we're in the safe zone or we're not. I can say for sure that we're headed towards a really dangerous place. There's a chance that some of these really big feedbacks, ecosystem feedbacks, will take the fate of the climate out of our hands.
So it was these YouTube videos on this methane bomb theory, right? That there was this mechanism where these methane hydrates will escape from like subsea permafrost or from shallow, the ESS ice shelf, and create this runaway global warming effect. Now I know that all of these claims are overblown. Like, it's the methane bomb claims specifically. Like, obviously there's permafrost feedback, but in terms of like research that Carolyn Ruppel did.
I'm Carolyn Ruppel, and I work for the U.S. Geological Survey. I'm a marine geophysicist, and I lead the USGS Gas Hydrates project. People who may not be too aware of the thermodynamics of gas hydrates may believe that once you start triggering warming of those and breakdown of those deposits, you can't stop it. And in fact, the thermodynamics helps you a lot on this because of the nature of the reaction. It's an endothermic heat of reaction. This is a problem when we try to produce methane from hydrates. It keeps shutting itself down, right? So it's not a situation where we trigger breakdown and that breakdown is going to suddenly, like the whole deposit's going to release its methane all of a sudden. That is not a scientifically sound worry.
So I don't know if you were able to hear any of that while I was playing. If not, you can go in and check out that video. But that's basically congratulations, Torsten. We've made the big time. We are officially on the conspiracy list at this point. So
yeah, well,
good job.
So what I started thinking about after blogging about this episode with this Yale propaganda video it's kind of like how much of the other climate communication we are seeing is also propaganda, because if it's made from bad will, if the intention is not to inform people, but the intention is more like making them prone to do this or that desired action, like voting for the Democrats or whatever thing that they want us to do, then it could be considered to be propaganda. I'm thinking, first and foremost, I'm thinking about like the IPCC itself and their reports. Mm-hmm. They talk about having 12 more years to get our carbon emissions down, and I think both you and I know that the important tipping points are in our past. We are already past them, and it doesn't really matter how many 40% we reduce our emissions by in 2030 or in 2040 or 2070. Some people are talking about reducing in the 2070s, and that's kind of sweet. But I'm thinking that if you have like this big United Nations body, which is using years and years and years, come out with a report, like they are 7 years apart to the biggest reports they make.
When climate is changing so quickly now. I mean, it's changing, like you track this thing on a daily basis, you know, and you see the changes.
As long as there is data to track. But, you have all the best scientists that the UN can draw from, and they have like 7 years to put out a report, and they still go, they can't really seem to remember that Greenland has a lot of ice and Antarctica has a lot of ice. They tend to forget that, and even when they're talking about warming to the year 2100, they forget about permafrost and methane. I mean, like,
it is total cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, or propaganda, because there is an ill will or a bad will behind it. If you put out those reports, You are not purveying scientific facts. You are actually spreading propaganda.
It's irresponsible and it's unethical as well. Especially to parade as, you know, a beacon of truth or whatever their reputation is supposed to be, and then you can see their data is like 7 years behind, and the lack of, they're like so caught up in the details that they've like lost the passion and the urgency. And so you just get this, I mean, have you ever tried to read those IPCC reports? I mean, they're like very hard to read.
Yeah, I mostly read them by searching for keywords and stuff, you know.
Oh, it's horrible. Yeah. And also I wanted to alert you to something. Have you heard about this new add-on app that's getting put into these search engines called NewsGuard? Have you heard about this thing?
No, I got some other annoying thing that's stuck on my computer.
Well, it might be annoying and it might be worse than that. NewsGuard is a browser extension made by NewsGuard Technologies. It labels news sources with either a green or red icon, indicating its general trustworthiness and whether it has a history of running stories labeled as fake news. Supported browsers include Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, Firefox, and Safari. It's also included in the mobile version. So this NewsGuard is, I think it's take a look at it and see what you think, but I think it's a little bit insidious, and I think it's the beginnings of, I mean, I know why they're doing it, because fake news has been such a concern with, you know, the political shenanigans that have happened, you know, not just in the United States, but a lot of elections are being tampered with fake news sources. And I saw it myself when Trump was running, and I saw people actually getting affected by these fake news sources. But this particular thing, I think it's a little bit more insidious than that. So take a look at...
Yeah, they're kind of doing the same thing in Scandinavia and Norway as well. You know, with these news sites that are doing like fact-checking news stories and stuff. But this is a very clear case of the cure being worse than the disease, you know, because that you have these very authoritarian corporations and people who are setting up these fact-checking sites, you know, fact-checking in, you know, ironic quotes, because they are actually promoting a political agenda, and when they so-called fact-check, they actually what can you say? They don't do a thorough job. They just promote their own opinions.
Yeah. So it becomes another filtered news source.
Yeah.
But it kind of, the thing I don't like about it is it's kind of delivered as part of the Microsoft package, for example. So it's insidious, you know, it's inside.
I remember Microsoft. I used to run Microsoft like a couple decades ago.
Oh, God, don't get me started.
That was fun.
Don't get me started.
It didn't get much work done, but it was kind of, you know, entertaining. You know?
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
So are they still a thing? Microsoft? Are they still making computers and stuff? I'm sorry.
I have no comment. We'll have to move on to another subject.
I heard this last thing I heard about Microsoft was that just the iPhone section of the Apple company was bigger in turnaround than the whole of Microsoft. That was like 10 years ago, I think.
Yeah. Did you ever see that documentary that had Bill Gates and Steve Jobs?
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, I think it was called like Triumph of the Nerds or something like that.
Triumph of the Nerds or Pirates of the Silicon Valley.
It was, right? And I remember that. And that was when all of these companies were just getting formed. And you could see like the internal politics between these two. And, you know, like, I really do believe that the brilliant one was Steve Jobs. I know he was kind of a prick, but I always had a secret crush on him anyway. Who didn't?
But you know, when
he was a visionary for sure.
When Apple Computer was started and they actually had a computer on the market, they hired Bill Gates to sit down and write some software for it. You know, like spreadsheets really? and some kind of text editor. So that's kind of interesting. So he was sort of their intern.
Yeah, well, you know where that all went. Yeah, that, and I believe he got the original code from DOS. I think there was a dude down in Texas who had like an Atari kit or one of these things, and he wrote this operating system that he called DOS. And I believe that Bill Gates got a contract as a coder to write an operating system at IBM, kind of like a little subcontract or something like that. And he got this base code from this kind of hobbyist in Texas who was doing like an operating system for his little garage computer, Atari, and he dreamed up some stuff and then he enhanced it and so forth. And that was the base beginning of DOS. And well, IBM should have owned it, but they made a mistake in their contract, and Bill Gates went and he founded Microsoft. So there you go. It's
very funny to watch actually these very old or these documentaries about the very beginning of the Silicon Valley and everything. It's like,
it's fascinating. Yeah. It's fascinating. I worked myself in Silicon Valley for a good many years at all the big companies. I was kind of a contractor back in the 90s, and went around to all the different big companies, sort of made my rounds like all good contractors do. And it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, even I was sent on an airplane to Silicon Valley once to go to corporate training with Yahoo.
Oh, really? That's right, because you were working on Yahoo Europe, weren't you?
So Yahoo Scandinavia. So when I had decided that I wanted to follow the Kyoto climate talks day by day very closely. And my plans were crashed because my boss said, you have to go to Silicon Valley in an airplane during the climate talks. So I hated it, but I thought if I say no, they'll just send another guy with the same airplane. So it's like you don't actually save the planet by being difficult, I think.
Yeah.
And there is no train line from Stockholm to California anyway, so
yeah, no doubt. Big ocean in between, right?
Yeah. So did you reach any conclusion as to who was the bigger wolf in the Yale methane saga? Is it like Catherine Ruppel, who seems to have been very, very anti-facts about methane for decades, or is it this younger Peter Sinclair guy? Who do you think is the bigger villain in that story?
I'm crushed, really. I'm deadly crushed because I love Peter Sinclair. I don't know why we're carrying on about it. As far as I can see, they're upset with the quote conspiracy people like you and me and others who've been vocal about the methane threat in the Arctic and kind of said it like it is, and it is actually science. It's not really just a conspiracy, something that we dreamed up one day and had like conversations in the background and came to the same conclusions. All that might be possible. But the main argument they have is that we say, I'm sorry, but you really jumped off the cliff. And they say, well, it's bad, but we can change it, and you haven't jumped off a cliff. I mean, when you boil it down, the methane conspiracy talks that are going on right now with the blogs and the videos, and now we're talking about it. It really is just like those two alternative views, more or less, isn't it?
I don't quite see how it's supposed to be a conspiracy, because you already have scientific reports talking about the emissions up there. And I had a short exchange late last night, with Peter Sinclair himself on Twitter. And then it
how was that? What did you guys tweet?
No, it emerged that he thought that his prior Yale Climate Connections video, which was about the methane time bomb on permafrost, he thought that his prior video for a year ago or something was totally different from this latest in January, because it turned out he doesn't know that the East Siberian Arctic shelf is actually submerged permafrost. He thought his prior video was about permafrost, but this new one was not about permafrost. So he doesn't even know that it's permafrost that's been studied.
Did he used to know this and he kind of forgot it more recently, or did he never know this?
I think it's just been told by somebody up high that the ESAS, East Siberian Arctic Shelf, that's a conspiracy. Don't even read the abstract. You can just forget about it. So he didn't even read the intro in the Wikipedia article.
I'm happy about that. I mean,
so he actually,
aren't you? I mean, if that in fact is reality, and we don't have to worry about the East Siberian Arctic Shelf being full of methane hydrate that got submerged at the end of the last ice age, that is like hugely deep and giant deposits. I mean, if that actually doesn't exist, then I'm relieved.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a blow that what I've been working on for the last 5 years has all been discounted as conspiracy. It's a little bit embarrassing, actually, to find out that what I put myself out in public for 5 years is nothing but a bloody conspiracy. But you know what? I can take that. And I understand that they might be right. And I'm just really relieved that I don't have to worry about this anymore. What do you think?
Now we'll see what happens. I mean, maybe when he now realizes that it's actually permafrost in Siberia as well. It's just you just added 50 meters of ocean water that is heating it much faster than the land permafrost. Right. So maybe he'll come around and say that, oh, maybe that is even melting even faster than the permafrost in Alaska, because he cares very much about methane from the Alaskan North Slope permafrost. But when he realizes in a day or two that if you add warming ocean water on top of that permafrost, and that's thawing down further and further down, like a foot every year, that's actually more threatening than the North Slope permafrost melting.
Right. And also, if they want just a graphic illustration of what it looks like when methane hydrate heats up and melts and can't get out of that place that it is in, and it just keeps going and raises the land up, and then freaking like blows its head off and explodes in a pile of flames and methane glory. Just go over to the Yamal Peninsula and the East Siberian Arctic Shelf area. It sticks out there, and it's full. It didn't get submerged after the end of the last ice age. I guess it was just...
That's land permafrost, but that's still explosive. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
So I don't know where this story will end up. Maybe he will recant his words and get his editor.
Torsten, really? You think so? You think he's going to give in to you on this particular point? Yale Climate Connections.
I don't know.
Giving into conspiracy theorists like you?
The last thing I saw was that he got plenty of support from MIT, Massachusetts Center of Technology or something. What is MIT meaning? Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Yeah. So there was
the only problem I see with this divergent reality, which is kind of what we've got going on, right? And we've got two realities that are going on, but they're slightly different. They're both climate change oriented, but one says methane is a big problem, and the other one says, no, it's not really a big problem, and we can control it. That's always the part they use. We can control it. I'm sorry to like do all these things with my hands, but it's kind of like I haven't seen anybody controlling it yet. But you know, good luck with that, right?
I think you have a good point, because I think it seems from what you read and hear about climate from the mainstream sources, it's like it seems that their conclusion was crafted before the footwork, you know, the legwork. So it seems they all want to say that, yeah, we can still handle this and control it as long as we do A, B, C, D, you know, and change our batteries and change our light bulbs and buy expensive electric cars from Asia, shipped with bunker oil. So it seems that their conclusion is like, yeah, this is still in our hands. And I'm doing stuff with my hands as well. It's still in our hands. Yeah, you and I can change.
It's in our hands.
Yeah.
It is still in our hands. It is ours to solve, because
we can solve it.
We have the history as a species of being able to handle things.
Yeah, we solve everything.
Like
we never screw up anything. You know, we are human beings.
Never. No.
So
if
you have the
sapient wise ape.
If you have the conclusion ready, that this is still in our hands, as I've said, then obviously if you find some facts from Siberia saying that it's not in our hands, we should have done something 100 years ago or 50 years ago, that obviously that must be a stupid conspiracy theory, or those facts must just not be facts, right? So
they're not facts, they're alternate facts.
Yeah, so if you're kicking the baby out with the bathwater in that way, and you're just throwing away the scientific process, and you're writing your conclusions before you start doing the research, that's what you get.
And the other thing you do is have videos with upset climate activists that are falling apart, and then the people who made her fall apart, these conspiracy methane people, are bad and must be exposed. Obviously. Or something.
Yeah, or maybe they should be sent to Siberia in training camps. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, it's hysterical. I've never really seen anything quite like this flavor of it. But you know, here we are. So you know, welcome to the Great Methane Wars, right?
Yeah. It's kind of strange when you see scientists on a serious scientific YouTube channel that are more concerned about you and me being on the internet than they are about the actual permafrost blowing to bloody pieces. You know, that we are the cause of concern.
Right. And the video that we were both recently involved with, right, Methane Monster 2, and the rehosting of it is an atrociously long and kind of like, you know, tedious account, scientifically, chart by chart, picture by picture, of 2 hours and 40 minutes of methane and climate change stuff that's happening now. And it was all drawn from credible sources. And I even did this freaking reference section at the end, because I had gotten dinged on my first video, the Arctic Methane Monsters Rapid Rise, for not having, you know, proper references. Who is this Jennifer Hynes? She's nobody. Whatever. I've never heard of her.
But that's what critics always do, you know. If you have the references, they will say, oh man, it's too many references. And if you don't have them, they will say, oh, this is non-scientific.
Well, it's all part, you know, I kind of take a step back, Torsten, and it's all part of, you know, the 5 stages of grief, and it happens at a mass level. Because it's very easy to understand this stuff and to look at it. I mean, all you have to do is do a little bit of research and have a little bit of obsession that causes you to watch YouTube videos for 10 hours a day on the subject. You can master it pretty quickly, and it's not difficult at all. It's actually very interesting and very engrossing. But then if you have all that data available to you and you refuse to draw the conclusions, or even worse, if you are in kind of complicit in its delivery and you deliver the message in such a way that it's influenced by other sources that are, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right? You know, like, you know, if you get on the news and you tell partial truths, you have to, because you're controlled by another external source, right?
Yeah. But let's not get into any conspiracy theories here.
No. Don't worry. Okay, well, the good thing is, what I was saying before is because it's been proven that the methane threat is a conspiracy and everybody should just not worry about it anymore.
Nothing to see here.
It's given me great peace of mind, you know, and now I can relax and I don't have to feel like I necessarily have to, you know, create this message in a variety of ways and scare everybody to death. I can just relax, go to the beach and have a nice life and just, you know, call off the dogs, right?
It's like now in the weekend you can sleep well at night and well at day. You can sleep all day and night because, you know, nothing to worry about.
Don't have to have these horrible visions of the fall of civilization with the freaking blackened earth, all poison, devoid of life, hot, sweaty, uninhabitable because of nuclear meltdowns. It all goes away, like all of that. The population rise, the declining resources, all of that goes away.
That makes me remember because I've been made aware of some old memories, and I actually have some permafrost memories, you know, up here. And the first one is from a student trip to Dublin, you know, with my class in Oslo. And this friend and me, we took, instead of the plane, we took the ferry and then the train through Ireland. So we went up on the mountain Ben Bulben in Sligo, in the Western Ireland. And right on the top of that mountain, there was, you know, like a small bathtub or something of collapsed permafrost. And I was like scratching my head because I've always been like this little professor or scientist, you know, like amateur scientist. So I was sort of scratching my head and said, what happened here, you know? Why is it sunk down like that? And I don't know if Ben Bulben used to have permafrost or not, but probably did, you know, if it's like 600-700 meters and, you know, as far north as Ireland is. And then the second memory is from Hardanger in the Norwegian mountains, where I was, you know, just walking around like I usually do up there, but in summer, this time in summer. And then I just saw sort of, you know, this dark brown permafrost soil, you know, just thrown up to the side, and I was like, wow, did they have a digger here or some huge construction work or something? This was in a remote lake area of Hardanger, so this is something that I've seen like many years ago, but it just sort of comes back, as you say. You talk about some visions of the future, but these are sort of visions of my past that I have seen, and I have scratched my head about what on earth happened there, because it looks very violent. You see, like, you know, meters and meters of dark brown turf just thrown out of place, you know. So.
Yeah. Well, it's happened before, and, you know, methane is a concern. Was it on your blog piece that you had in rebuttal in Frozen.Earth, you had as the graphic methane pockmarks that were done clearly from sonar taken from the seabed, and these methane pockmarks were on top of grooves that were left by glaciers. And so one can easily conclude, and they were monolithic up to kilometer wide, actually, and there were thousands of them. I mean, it was just like a seabed full of these things.
Yeah, these are some Norwegian researchers who have discovered this, pretty young researchers. And what amazed me the most was that this was not mud or sediments. These were pockmarks in hard rock, you know, in like granite or something.
In granite bedrock. So it's very dramatic, because when you look at it and you know what you're looking at, and it's all derived from very kind of high resolution sonar, you can see the grooves that were created by the glaciers as they slid down the mountains and slid along the seabed, and the rocks that were dragged with them, the boulders that were dragged with them, creating these grooves. And then atop these grooves are giant methane craters up to a mile wide or a kilometer wide. I mean, and a lot of them, it's sizable. Coming straight out of the bedrock and exploding out of the bedrock. It's kind of like, when you start to look at it, it's like, that's kind of scary, right?
It is, absolutely. And it doesn't look healthy, because it's almost like if you have an arm or a body of a human with sort of pockmarks, it looks very disgusting, and, something bad happened here, right? Yeah.
Something bad happened here. And I think it was after the kind of like, I don't know if it was happening at the end of the last ice age, but, the end of the last ice age kind of was sliding in, and then it had a pretty steep melt pulse 1A, and they had three melt pulses, but the first one was super steep, and it kind of all of a sudden, whatever was happening, it started happening fast, and the all told, when you put those 3 melt pulses together, you get 410 feet of sea level rise between like 14,000 years ago, and I think it stopped like 8,000 years ago or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. Right.
Yeah, but all told, you put all that together, you've got 400, and please do the meter translation. that I'm sorry. I can't help it. I'm an American. Guilty as charged, Anyway.
Yeah, there was a great comic video clip on that from some American comedian. And I can't remember the joke itself, but the punchline is like, this is totally incomprehensible. We cannot understand this. It's metric. So the whole point was that we Americans can't understand how hot it was in Paris because it's a metric system.
I'm so sorry. I apologize for the citizens of my country. There's a lot to apologize for, actually. Yeah.
So back to this, the Shrinking Planet film. Do you have any plans for showing it to a wider public, or what's happening with that?
Well, we premiered it with you. You premiered it for us. So it was just right after New Year's. I believe we premiered that on January 2nd. And so this is supposed to be kind of the introduction premiere, I guess. But, it's 54 minutes. It's a very, very good narrator, Eduardo Ballerini, and God help him, he's so good. And the soundtrack that has music kind of background throughout. Dougie is brilliant with sound, and he and Dante of WIGO had at it and created a soundtrack that I thought was really beautiful and stellar and very poignant and very moving. And then you have the prose of Bill McKibben in his epic work, you know, Life on a Shrinking Planet, which came out right around Thanksgiving time, you know, right around the same time that the climate report came out. You know, and he's clearly going through it, and he's gone through so much since the initial days at 350.org. And I saw him speak at Pioneers a couple of years ago. I was very moved. I mean, he knows exactly what's going on. He's going through a deep mourning, as we all are. I mean, none of us want or can conceive of what it means that this set of living arrangements, as it's so called by many people, is going away. But it's hard to see that it's going away. But we can see that it's going away, and we're all reacting in our own way. And so to see Bill McKibben write this incredible article that premiered in the New Yorker, Life on a Shrinking Planet, and then, you know, the narration of Eduardo Ballerini, and then Dougie gave me the soundtrack and said, you know, have at it, see what you can do. And this always takes me through a lot. It's difficult to create these things. You know, I mean, I feel, and I always have the same sort of approach whenever I do one of these creative projects, because my first reaction, because it's usually kind of like something I've got to get done. My first reaction is to ignore it. So, you know, I'll spend the first 2 weeks of pretending like it doesn't exist, kind of like, you know, that's not there.
I think
because
I think
it's
you
going to
did
require a lot of work.
I think you did an splendid job, particularly with the alligator and the swamps in Florida and stuff.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
with John Muir. I think that was excellent.
No, I mean, it's a very poignant piece. I mean, it's multidimensional, and I think it's Bill McKibben's, you know, epic prose, and it's such a heartfelt article that brings in so many issues, and takes a big blow at ExxonMobil especially, and the government of the U.S. in particular. And I don't know, I think it's a moving work. I would like to say I enjoyed working on it. What I can say is I don't enjoy working on these things, but I have to get them done, and then it becomes an obsession. And then I have to, for a period of time, while I'm in the thick of it, I have to go down into the belly of the beast and experience every single one of these filthy, horrible conclusions and emotions. And then I have to live and breathe it and sleep. And then in that period of creating it, I work like until 2. Yeah, I work until like 2. I can't stop. And then I'll look at the clock and 3 hours, and I'm like, what's happened? And then I'll say, oh, well, just a few more things.
And then you dream about it at night, and then you wake up.
Yeah, and it's horrible because it's a horrible reality to have to contemplate and understand. And then, you know, then I kind of like, oh, I'm done. And I just give it out. And I feel like, oh, thank God I got through that one.
I'm not sure that the people who are watching things on YouTube, and you know, people, if you know, some of the audience are only watching, they never produce something, and I'm not sure that those viewers actually appreciate or actually understand how much heartbreaking work it goes into some of these things.
Oh, it is. It's horrible, and especially putting the famine scenes together. And I had video from like all these horrible places where poor children were starving to death, and I was like, God, this is intense. I almost didn't put some of it in, and I'm just like, you know what, show it. Just do it. And so, I mean, that was intense. I mean, this video is intense, and I don't think that it should be dismissed by any regard as being like hopium because it's associated with Bill McKibben. And poor Bill McKibben got a bad rap as being a hopium addict, when in fact, you know, I understand completely. But I think he's also kind of evolved and changed his conclusion and kept up to date with everything that's happening, unlike some people that don't look at the Arctic for 5 years and then draw conclusions. You can't imagine who I might be talking about, right?
Yeah, he is kind of hopium high even in that video, because he's like talking about. I remember one sequence.
Oh, yeah,
he's
I
talking
know.
about the moment when your president was on the lawn telling everybody that he was pulling out of the Paris Agreement, and then Bill McKibben comments that at exactly the point when we needed to start doing something, then we pulled out of the agreement. So Bill McKibben is actually saying in that video that 2017, that was when we needed to do something. So he's a little bit off, maybe 30, 40 years. You know.
I think that that's part of the mourning.
Yeah.
I don't think that you can allow yourself to contend with the dire truth. And I don't think I'm being a conspiracy theorist when I'm saying that. I mean, everybody's entitled to draw whatever conclusion
But
they want.
I have a suggestion for you or for the video.
Oh, tell me.
You have to decide if it's an inappropriate suggestion or whatever you call it over there. So I would suggest that you think about it and decide whether or not you would let other channels like Climate State and other climate channels on YouTube not promote it, but actually re-upload it. Just amplify the message.
It's odd that you saw that, because I had that same thought, and I think I'll do it. But both of those recordings appeared in their naked conditions with no music and audio only, or I think they had some video with it actually, but it was like very still. But Climate State has already premiered both of these recordings, all three of them actually, because
but not your production of it, right? Not this production.
No, not this production. See, I think some magic happens because the music that Dougie chose, and hats off to Dougie for choosing this music, is very evocative, and it kind of spans a lot of different kind of bandwidth in your emotional body. And when you blend this really, I think it's beautiful, badass music, tastefully blended and tastefully done by professional DJs, right? And then blend it with the information and the narration and the imagery.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
All of those things together evoke a powerful understanding of the situation, because some people wrote in the comments, that Bill McKibben's article was good, but just reading it flat, I mean, not even having it read to you, right? Just reading it, it's so long and it's rather weighty, and it takes a lot of willpower to get through it. It's from a mental point of view, just going through a very lengthy article that has no musical accompaniment, no imagery. But this medium, it's a new medium because it takes the thoughts of great leaders, gets powerful narrators that really can evoke a sort of emotional response, puts together the really evocative music, and then the imagery and the video format that's topic specific really blend together to make a whole new powerful sort of communication format. You know what I mean?
I agree. It's top notch because people have been, or media scientists have been saying for 20, 30 years that video, because it serves more senses than just one. It doesn't just serve your brain or rational center, it serves your visual and the sound thing, and it serves the emotional center as well. So you get all those elements in a video like the one you are talking about.
It's powerful. I mean, even I, who freaking co-produced this with Dougie the Abolitionist, I go back and I watch it and I'm drawn in. It has a very sort of hypnotic quality, and the information is so powerful and impactful and, you know, specific, that it really has the power to draw you in, and you kind of get, you know, it's a different kind of medium. I'm very proud to have been associated with this production as a co-producer. Really am.
And about the magic you were talking about, Google, you know, you remember when it was called Google Video? You know, before YouTube, it was Google Video.
Oh, yeah. Golly!
Yeah.
Is that true? I didn't know that.
So Google Video deleted some of my artwork, and you know,
really?
just because I had music. So what I was going to say is that I know what you mean when you talk about the magic that happens, because I only had like you know, let's say I had 30 photos from a mountain trip or something, and then I would use some Joy Division song or something, and mix that with my images, which I carefully chose, you know, to be the best photos and to tell a story in a way. And something very magical happens when you think about a song, and then you try, does this song fit with these pictures? And then you merge it into a video, and something larger than the elements happens when you join them together sometimes. Yeah.
It's the motion. It allows us a medium upon which to launch our spiritual and emotional journey. You can feel yourself traveling. It creates a sense of motion and cohesion and connectedness. And, you know, it's like it gives you a medium to kind of ride on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Journey. So. Yeah, it's a journey. And again, the question always comes up. I mean, you know, you and I are I would say, fairly confirmed. I hate the term really doomers, but we're, you know, I mean, we've looked at it and we've reached our unfortunate, dire conclusions. So given that point of view, why is it that we are determined to continue to communicate this message again and again and again? Why is that?
I think for my part, I recently quoted Guy Lane, because Guy Lane says that I'm not a doomer, I'm a
gloomer. I'm a gloomer.
Gloomer, yeah.
He said, I'm a gloomer.
Yeah, so I quoted him on that, but it as everything else, it depends on your definitions, right? So if you're talking about the doom of civilization, I'm all in. You know, that will happen and should happen. But I'm not dooming the biosphere yet, or humanity yet. Just a lot of them, big bunch of them. But and gloom, you know, these are not Nordic words. So it's like gloom is as like everything is gonna suck, because that's definitely gonna happen, right? But maybe I could say that I'm a doomer if you're talking about civilization, but I'm not a doomer as to doom every single last human being.
We don't know. We don't know how this is going to roll out. We don't know the sequence of events that's going to precipitate this, and it's probably going to be death by 1,000 cuts, and it won't be final for, I mean, who knows really how it's going to play out? We don't know. All that we can see is that we can see, you know, the data of the current, the data of the past, and the forecast of the future, given self-reinforcing feedbacks and how they're all working together. The scary thing that's happening now is that there are more ties being drawn into these self-reinforcing feedbacks, so they all are connected to some extent, you know?
Yeah. You know, last summer I recorded the sound of melting glacier ice in the fjord. Maybe I'll just attach that to the end of this chat. It's kind of the sound of the apocalypse is like the sound of ice melting. You know, it's some prickly yeah, it's a cracking sound, you know. So people say that will the world end with a bang or whatever? What's the quote?
But with a whimper.
Yeah,
the world won't end with a bang, but with a whimper.
I think it will end with this sound of the melting ice, because then all the rest of the permafrost will be flooded, and you know, all the big cities will be flooded, all the agriculture areas will be flooded, and at the same time, people in Asia won't get any drinking water from the Himalayas, and
it's horrendous. I mean, it's no wonder that people can't think about this. It's no wonder people defend their views. I don't blame them at all.
No.
I wish I could fall back into oblivion some days, you know.
You know, Hambone Littletail says it in one of his videos when something breaks or whatever in the middle of the forest, and he says, "This is what the collapse will look like. It's gonna suck," he says. I think that's very, very correct. You'll be lonely. You'll be offline. You'll have no people to meet or connect with, and you'll be in a constant struggle to find your next meal. You know, to kill your next meal or whatever. Right?
It just is horrible. It's too horrible to contemplate, really. It's horrible to understand. You could get depressed thinking about things like that. How do you stave that off?
I think the best thing about the collapse is that everything will turn from totally global to very local, right? So if you're in like a mountain valley in Norway, you won't see all the terrible things going on all over the rest of the world. You will only see whatever happens there. So that's kind of a comfort, I think.
So we'll become more tribal than we are today as we try and scruff out an existence.
Yeah, you can
relearn skills that we used to know hundreds of years ago, but those skills have gone all by the wayside, you know. But
yeah, you can be tribal if you're able to find another human being. You can start being tribal in Spe. But it's like, how many are going to survive, and how many miles do you have to go to find anyone else? You know, it's like...
Well, it just sounds horrible. It sounds like one of these futuristic, kind of apocalyptic novels that, you know, we're all tempted to read these days.
Yeah.
I think there was one called The Road that was particularly kind of grim.
Yeah. I halfway wrote a poem collection a couple of years ago about that kind of scenario, and you know, one of the strangest things is like, well, in 2019 you can just swipe on your iPhone to find a partner, you know, whatever, and maybe 5 years from now you'll have to like find a horse and ride for 7 weeks in order to find even a candidate for what we call swiping today, you know, if you're that lucky.
Well, a lot of this is dependent, to a large extent, on the health and, you know, keeping in place of the Arctic sea ice. And the Greenland ice sheet as well, but I think the Arctic sea ice in particular, because it's protecting the non-existent methane hydrates that are not in place, even though plumes of methane that are not happening are over 1 kilometer wide, even at this point.
Yeah,
however, that's not there because it is in the Siberian Arctic shelf.
I think I know what you mean. Yeah.
Right. Anyway, I mean, the thing is, I mean, you know, I'm being a little bit tongue-in-cheek here, but to a large extent, these visions are dependent on when the Arctic sea ice goes in its entirety, right? Wouldn't you say that those, like, the downfall of civilization would probably precipitate along with the Arctic sea ice decline, or how linked, do you think, those two?
Yeah, I think the sequence is perhaps that you have the loss of sea ice for half a year or a full year, and then the heating of the ocean, Arctic Ocean, will go very, very rapidly, and then you will melt away a lot of mountain ice in Greenland. You will flood the Siberian and Alaskan and Canadian areas, and then the methane permafrost stuff is really going to come out like a house on fire. And somewhere along that sequence of events, I think most international trade and most distribution of food and everything humans do is going to collapse, and that's sort of the end of 12,000 years of organized humanity. But as I say in one of my video essays, I say that we already know that we have had prehistoric human beings, before the written history. And then we had historic human beings, like you and me, during civilization. And of course, we are going to have, whether you think there'll be many or not, or for a long time or not, we are going to have post-historic human beings, Oh,
wow. I had never thought of that, of course.
Yeah, so I always thought that was a strange thing with the prehistoric, because everybody is part of history, right? No. Actually, according to the historians, history begins when people start writing history. And the other human beings before that are prehistoric. Yeah. So I think there are good odds that both you and I are going to experience the post-historic epoch. And how long that's going to be, not for you and me, but for everybody else, that's impossible to say. Maybe 100 years, maybe 1,000 years. Maybe it will go on for another 10,000 years because the planet is so diverse. You have so high mountains, you have polar areas and equatorial areas and islands and all that stuff. Almost like migratory birds, we can go to a place that is less severely affected than the others. But it's like I said when I was interviewed by Sam Mitchell, even if you go to a place that seems to be ideal, like Antarctica or Greenland or whatever, that there is stuff happening in the oceans all the time that is collapsing the marine food web, right? So even if you are in a place where there's lots of fishing and marine life, it's like how long is that gonna be a thing if you have like algae blooms and imported pests and everything,
Well, we haven't even mentioned that on our talk today. I mean, that's a whole nother talk, but, talk about the collapsing oceans. Why is it that didn't really come up in our talk today? But I mean, that's like unthinkable. And whole layers of the food webs are being removed, like, the krill, or, whole populations are dying at once, things are beaching themselves, thousands of fish are showing up dead in places. I mean, on and on and on it goes. It's beyond tragic.
I think Dar Jamail wrote about that collapse in his End of Ice book, which I read when I was down in the Canary Islands. I read it in 2 days, I think, but I just read all day. And he talked about the Alaskan islands, the Aleutians or whatever they're called.
Aleutians.
Yeah. So what happened there was that you had one bit of poison algae or something, and that went into the blue mussels and the other parts of the food web. So when you get like thousands and thousands of puffins or seabirds or seals or whatever being beached dead, lying dead on the beach or in the sea, it's because of a tiny element, but because of the structure of the food web, you only need one primary producer or primary plankton or whatever to fail or to go poisonous.
That's right.
And then you affect the whole of the rest up to the blue whale and human beings. You know, so.
Yes, tragic. I don't know what to say, Torsten. I mean, it is a tragic, tragic time that we're living in, and for some reason, both you and I are witnessing it and sharing our witnessing with others. And why do we do this? Why do we feel compelled to communicate these things that we see? I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. But maybe because it's, like Hambone says, it's sort of the biggest story in the history of human beings on the planet.
Oh, well, that's undoubtedly true. There is that.
There is that.
Great. But it's always good to catch up with you. It really is. It's a kindred spirit, and I'm very happy that Methane Monster 2, Demise of the Arctic, has found, you know, care under the Viking and on going south, as long as the internet shall reign.
Yeah. So, do you want me to write in the video description that people are allowed to re-upload?
Oh, absolutely. I'd be happy if they did. Sure. I hadn't thought of that. So I will make a little blurb that we can add to it.
Yeah.
And perhaps I'll approach Climate State. And if anybody out there knows Bill McKibben, tell him for me that I made a video with his article, because I don't think he knows, you know. I don't know if somebody will give that message to Bill McKibben, he might like it, you know, because he put a lot of effort into that article, and I don't think he knows that there's a video out there.
Somebody should tell him.
Somebody should tell him.
Okay.
Anyway.
I hope we can get you back here in March.
Yeah, sure. Be always happy to come back and touch base with you about whatever is happening at the time on Going South in your great video blog, Talking South.
Yep. And with that, I bid you all farewell. Bye.
Bid you farewell. Thank you.